The next level was similar to the floor beneath it. Thinking about it, Han decided to make this level different from the one below. Han imagined a sweltering and humid jungle. Thick and ancient trees exploded from the floor, as though reaching for the ceiling. Thick vines wrapped and snaked around the trunks. Compared to the forest he had seen in his life, in front of him were shades of green. Entering it would be closer to swimming through plant life. Smelling the jungle, he felt like he was entering the Amazon. With one of the thickest jungles in his old world in his mind, Han pictured giant, poisonous anacondas, monkeys leaping between trees, throwing poisonous, exploding spores at intruders, silent leopards stalking their prey on the spreading branches and the ground. Finally, giant spiders weaving massive webs, eager for a meal. Changing the ceiling to look like the sky and the ground covered in deep soil, the floor was indistinguishable from the outside, confusing those entering the level. Signaling to Helania, they moved to the foot of the stairs leading to the 4th floor. He stopped before moving to the next level and considered the creatures to guard his floor. I wonder what I should create this time. Han rubbed his chin. It was like standing in front of a blank canvas, and he was the artist. Han smiled. Instead of just one, why not more? In his mind were 2 different women, both drastically different. Thinking of the jungle and wanting to maintain the floor's theme, Han looked at the jungle and noticed a snake slowly sliding through the swampy water. Holding out a hand, 2 globes emerged, waiting for Han's will. Starting with the first one, the upper body of a woman burst out of one of the globes. What was different was the lower body, serpentine. The first female was a lamia. From the head, thick jade-colored hair poured out. It practically glittered from the simulated sunlight. Starting from the creamy, smooth belly, the emerald tail glittered down the full length as though it belonged to an anaconda. Beneath the shimmering scales, the muscle would help against intruders. Being hit by the muscular tail would quickly dispatch any attempt against her. This time, he didn't provide her with clothes. Her long, silky hair would provide ample coverage for her mesmerizing breasts when it wasn't floating in the air. Her name would be Anacolis. Though her stats would be comparable to her fellow creations, I like the idea of her matching her surroundings. Han smiled. Anacolis' specialty was stealth. Different from Helania and Minatoria, Anacolis had superior stealth abilities. Floating next to her, Han imagined a bow perfectly complementing Anacolis. It didn't require any arrows and would shoot out ones that would paralyze her target. The second creation would be an arachnes. Instead of a serpent's tail, the lower half would be a spider. Where the head belonged, a beautiful woman's body emerged. He thought it would fit her image to have shoulder-length hair and made it purple. He also enjoyed how some of the shells on Aurasia's lower half caught the light, creating a purple shimmer. Some parts actually looked to capture light. Aurasia's upper body was pale like her sister's. The way light interacted with the spider body made Han think how difficult it would be for people to see the arachnes if Aurasia was in shadowy areas. Like her sister, Anacolis, Aurasia wouldn't be covering her beautiful assets. But different than Anacolis was how they would be bare the entire time. These sisters would love one another and help each other protect the jungle. They would be devoted siblings, ensuring the other's safety was a top priority next to their creators. Both sisters specialized in stealth, though Aurasia was closer to an assassin than Anacolis' ranger skills. Aurasia, an arachnes, was perfect for her ability and fighting style. With that in mind, Han decided to give her daggers and short swords to help her assassinate intruders. While Anacolis would attack from a distance and help paralyze her opponents, Aurasia would sneak behind them and finish them. I imagine none will enjoy their preference for poison and similar tactics. Both were enough to eliminate potential threats, but he liked giving them fighting styles. With the size of the floor, it would be easy for intruders to get lost and become easy prey for any of the numerous creatures hungry for a quick snack. Once their bodies were completed, they floated down. "The 2 of you look ethereal," Han whispered. They slowly opened their eyes and bowed before him, considering they could not kneel. Walking up to both of them, he felt their smooth, pale skin, and bringing them closer to him, Han gave each of them a passionate kiss. The two sisters let a primal moan. It was clear they felt carnal desire toward their master. After finishing his kiss, Han smiled. "I look forward to seeing how you perform in the future, and I hope you'll give your all for me." The two sisters silently bowed. "We shall complete all trials ahead of us and give ourselves to our master, body, heart, and soul," accepting everything their master wished. Their cheeks were flush and their chest exposed how hot they felt, aroused by his kiss. To hide their feelings, they kept their heads lowered and waited for their master to continue to the next floor. "I need something that can create numbers fast and endlessly overwhelm my enemies." Han looked at the empty floor. He thought each floor served a purpose. Since he planned on the fourth being the last line of defense, it would be important to ensure that nothing intruded further into his home. Looking back at games, a character that met such parameters was a Necromancer. Han wanted something that could instantly summon an infinite number of skeletons and other related mobs to bury those that stood in his way. Though he could easily wipe out anything, considering his broken ability, he liked the image of kingdoms and empires being overrun by the dead. It was necessary for his enemies to think as though the underworld gates had opened to spew out a tsunami of death, an uncaring force of nature that would devastate anything in its path. Even the Grim Reaper would feel swamped. Helania smiled at the glint in her master's eyes. Han was always fond of horror movies, so movies involving zombies were his top choice. The first thing that happened was a tidal wave of dirt covering the ground. A thick fog rolled over everything, making it nearly impossible to see the ground. Like mushrooms growing out of death, tombstones, mausoleums, dead trees, and other sinister eldritch items burst out from the dirt. The fog disturbed only for a moment. Death and decay permeated the air. When he and Helania were teleported to the exit, Han began to build his powerful Necromancer. As though summoned from his desires, arms burst out from the ground. The woman was outfitted in leather, a corset making her figure appear slim. Her torso was covered in leather, blossoming to reveal her pale, large breasts that seemed to want to overflow. Han's eyes enjoyed the view. Her arms and thighs revealed skin that could belong to the dead, though it oozed strength instead of deterioration. On her back was a broadsword larger than her body. There was also a whip on her hip. "She is my queen of death," Han spoke aloud. Seeing death everywhere, he couldn't help but think about how it often was weak against holy magic in games and popular lore. The only difference with her Necromancer skill was how it wasn't weak to holy magic. "I should even make her able to use holy and divine magic," Han mentally chuckled at the expressions enemies using holy magic would have upon discovering their attacks to be ineffective. He wanted them to feel despair when they realized that, like death, his queen would be their inevitable conclusion. Han walked to where his queen of death stood. Laying his hand on her cheek, Han said, "My beautiful queen, you are not only in charge of protecting this floor, but you are also in charge of my armies." Glancing to his side, he quickly created 100 creatures formed from the shadows. Their figures could barely be seen as though darkness made manifest. Looking back at Queen, "These creatures shall be your responsibility and, in addition to myself, will be controlled by you. They are created for the sole purpose of espionage. You will lead armies of the dead and be a plague on all who be foolish enough to stand in my way." Not moving away from his hand on her cheek, Queen looked dazed as she cherished the warmth of his hand. "For you, I shall commit any acts as long as it pleases my master." As Han and Helania walked up to the next floor, Queen held herself. Queen felt where her creator touched her. Though the warmth may have faded, her body would always remember. Even at that moment, she longed for him. Then, feeling empowered, Queen began summoning Death Knights, skeleton warriors, and skeleton mages. Though the floor looked more accessible than previous floors with no barriers, the infinite number of death-related mobs would overwhelm any that entered. Reaching the next floor, Han thought it was necessary to have amenities on this level. Han tried to think back to various hotels and other hospitality-related businesses he'd previously visited. I want someplace that feels better than a person's home. It's key that any guests allowed to stay would never wish to leave. Han wanted the floor to be different from the first 4 levels. Instead of keeping people out, the 5th floor would be all about comfort and relaxation. With his memories and pictures he'd seen in travel magazines, he created living quarters, hallways, and other items on one side, making it appear grander than any opulent hotel on Earth. On the other side, Han created a dining area to shame any travel tire star restaurant. If people from Earth were to ever dine in these restaurants, I want them to be heartbroken to not be able to experience the service provided when they leave. Though people would be able to come and go, with permission from him and his creations, a portion of the guest would be trapped forever. It would give them a sense of longing to return. Now, I need servants who will guarantee everything is impeccable. Every desire of the guests, within reason, would be met. They would always be ready to serve those fortunate to relax in the stronghold. With the wave of his hand, Han created 100 maids to ensure his stronghold would look immaculate. Though their beauty was lacking compared to his floor protectors, their appearance would still be spectacular. Another wave of his hand made numerous chefs, sous chefs, waitresses, and other related food industry workers. From what he remembered in school, any organization could only function if it had an army of support staff. With that in mind, he knew that each one would be professional in how they carried out their duty. Han quickly created a room that would generate all necessary food ingredients with his ability. The kitchen was filled with fantastic cooking equipment and tools to help the cooks prepare the meals. The stronghold needed to be self-sufficient. With that in mind, Han also created areas where supplies would always be available for the support staff to use. Each creature on this floor had its job-related skills and abilities. Han didn't need to concern himself with maintaining the stronghold and could focus on more exciting tasks. He glanced at Helania, assured if anything went wrong, she would be more than able to handle such matters. Though he created living beings from his thoughts, Han wondered whether this translated to real food. He remembered how Helania had sketched the labyrinth on the first floor, but he still was curious whether it was due to Helania's high stats. Sitting at one of the tables, he motioned one of the waitresses to come. "Bring me a noodle dish with meat and vegetables in it," he ordered. "Yes, my master," she curtsied. As she left to fulfill her duty, Han watched her movement. Her hips somehow could sway sensually while still being professional in appearance. "I imagine human resources would sweat with having such staff on the payroll," Han snickered. Waiting at the table while his food was being prepared, Han wondered what his endgame would be in this world. "Where do I go with this?" Han leaned back on the chair. "Is there even an end?" He was lost in thought before thinking, "At least I'll be able to follow where I think this should go. The message even said I'd be unrestricted and could enjoy my life." Not having any restrictions made him smile. "It's not like this is some story where I need to worry about whether the reader is enjoying it." Han grinned. Thinking of books and how they had to follow such a rigid structure to become profitable made him think about how his new adventure would be boring and tedious with such restrictions. With his hand, he casually created a flawless rose. Each petal felt as though it existed only to be aesthetically pleasing to the holder. The rose in his hand symbolized the infinite possibilities in front of him. "Helania, I created this for you to match your beauty." He raised the rose to let her take it from his hand. Her hand trembled as it brushed against his. "My master, I do not deserve such praise." Helania's voice quivered with emotions as she took the rose. She raised it to her face, placing her nose into it. A large smile spread across her face as her cheeks began to match the flower's petals. Footsteps interrupted the moment as the waitress and chef approached him, carrying his meal. The waitress carefully placed the dish in front of him, the tray not letting out a sound as it touched the table. She then stepped away, waiting to hear his verdict on the meal. Materializing some chopsticks, he started to eat the Asian-looking cuisine. He slurped up the noodles, enjoying the chewiness. "It's not even greasy," Han thought as he swallowed the food. Somehow, his mouth felt refreshed. It reminded him of various regional dishes, with a hint of Korean, Chinese, and Japanese flavors. Everything was perfectly cooked and made him want to continue eating more. Within moments, Han was drinking the soup and emptying the bowl. Han smiled. "It was delicious," he complimented the nervous waitress and chef. Hearing that their master had enjoyed the meal, both relaxed and smiled. "We do not deserve your praise!" both of them shouted out, bowing nearly 90 degrees. Waving his hand to acknowledge them, he got up and continued towards the stairs that led to the next floor. Han was confident that the staff would be able to fulfill their roles to the standards he set for them.